Part 2 of Chapter 18 of Aequanimitas by Sir William Osler. This is a Librivox Recording. All Librivox Recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org. Part 2 of Chapter 18 The Master Word in Medicine. With what I hope to infect you is a desire to have a due proportion of each. So far as your professional education is concerned, what I shall say may make for each one of you an easy path easier. The multiplicity of the subjects to be studied is a difficulty, and it is hard for teacher and student to get a due sense of proportion in the work. We are in a transition stage in our methods of teachings, and have not everywhere got away from the idea of the examination as the be-all and end-all, so that the student has constantly before his eyes the magical letters of the degree he seeks. And this is well, perhaps, if you will remember that having, in the old phrase, commenced Bachelor of Medicine, you have only reached a point from which you can begin a lifelong process of education. So many and varied are the aspects presented by this theme that I can only lay stress upon a few of the more essential. The first step towards success in any occupation is to become interested in it. Locke put this in a very happy way when he said, "Give a pupil a relish of knowledge, and you put life into his work." And there is nothing more certain than that you cannot study well if you are not interested in your profession. Your presence here is a warrant that in some way you have become attracted to the study of medicine, but the speculative possibilities so warmly cherished at the outset are apt to cool when in contact with the stern realities of the classroom. Most of you have already experienced the all-absorbing attraction of the scientific branches, and nowadays the practical method of presentation has given a zest which was usually lacking in the old theoretical teaching. The life has become more serious in consequence, and medical students have put away many of the childish tricks with which we used to keep up their bad name. Compare the picture of the sawbones of 1842, as given in the recent biography of Dr. Henry Acland, with the representatives today, and it is evident a great revolution has been effected, and very largely by the salutary influences of improved methods of education. It is possible now to fill out a day with practical work varied enough to prevent monotony, and so arranged that the knowledge is picked out by the student himself and not thrust into him willy-nilly at the point of the tongue. He exercises his wits and is no longer a passive Strasbourg goose, tied up and stuffed to repletion. How can you take the greatest possible advantage of your capacities with the least possible strain? By cultivating system. I say cultivating advisedly, since some of you will find the acquisition of systematic habits very hard. There are minds congenitally systematic. Others have a lifelong fight against an inherited tendency to diffuseness and carelessness in work. A few brilliant fellows try to dispense with it altogether, but they are a burden to their brethren and a sore trial to their intimates. I have heard it remarked that order is the badge of an ordinary mind. So it may be, but as practitioners of medicine, we have to be thankful to get into that useful class. Let me entreat those of you who are here for the first time to lay to heart what I say on this matter. Forget all else, but take away this counsel of a man who has had to fight a hard battle, and not always a successful one, for the little order he has had in his life. Take away with you a profound conviction of the value of system in your work, I appeal to the freshmen especially, because you today make a beginning and your future career depends very much upon the habits you will form during this session. To follow the routine of the classes is easy enough, but to take routine into every part of your daily life is a hard task. Some of you will start out joyfully, as did Christian and Hopeful, and for many days will journey safely towards the Delectable Mountains, dreaming of them and not thinking of disaster until you find yourselves in the strong captivity of doubt and under the grinding tyranny of despair. You have been overconfident. Begin again and more cautiously. No student escapes wholly from these perils and trials. Be not disheartened. Expect them. Let each hour of the day have its allotted duty, and cultivate that power of concentration which grows with its exercise, so that the attention neither flags nor wavers, but settles with a bulldog tenacity on the subject before you. Constant repetition makes a good habit fit easily in your mind, and by the end of the session you may have gained that most precious of all knowledge, the power to work. Do not underestimate the difficulty you will have in wringing from your reluctant selves the stern determination to exact the uttermost minute on your schedule. Do not get too interested in one study at the expense of another, but so map out your day that due allowance is given to each. Only in this way can the average student get the best that he can out of his capacities, and it is worth all the pains and trouble he can possibly take for the ultimate gain. If he can reach his doctorate with system so ingrained that it has become an integral part of his being, the artistic sense of perfection in work is another much to be desired quality to be cultivated. No matter how trifling the matter on hand, do it with a feeling that it demands the best that is in you, and, when done, look it over with a critical eye, not sparing a strict judgment of yourself. This it is that makes anatomy a student's touchstone. Take the man who does his part to perfection, who has got out all there is in it, who labours over the tags of connective tissue and who demonstrates Meckel's ganglion in his part. This is the fellow in after years who is apt in emergencies, who saves a leg badly smashed in a railway accident, or fights out to the finish, never knowing when he is beaten, in a case of typhoid fever. Learn to love the freedom of the student life, only too quickly to pass away, the absence of the coarser cares of after days, the joy in comradeship, the delight in new work, the happiness in knowing that you are making progress. Once only can you enjoy these pleasures. The seclusion of the student life is not always good for a man, particularly for those of you who will afterwards engage in general practice, since you will miss that facility of intercourse upon which often the doctor's success depends. On the other hand, sequestration is essential for those of you with high ambitions proportionate to your capacity. It was for such that St. Chrysostom gave his famous counsel, "Depart from the highways and transplant thyself into some enclosed ground, for it is hard for a tree that stands by the wayside to keep its fruit till it be ripe." Has work no dangers connected with it? What of this bogey of overwork of which we hear so much? There are dangers, but they may readily be avoided with a little care. I can only mention two, one physical, one mental. The very best students are often not the strongest. Ill health, the bridle of the ages, as Plato called it in the case of one of his friends whose mind had thriven at the expense of his body, may have been the diverting influence towards books or the profession. Among the good men who have studied with me there stands out in my remembrance many a young Lycidas, dead ere his prime, sacrificed to carelessness in habits of living and neglect of ordinary sanitary laws. Medical students are much exposed to infection of all sorts, to combat which the body must be kept in first-class condition. Grosseteste, the great Bishop of Lincoln, remarked that there were 3 things necessary for temporal salvation: food, sleep, and a cheerful disposition. Add to these suitable exercise, and you have the means by which good health may be maintained. Not that health is to be a matter of perpetual solicitation, but habits which favour the corpus sanum foster the mens sana, in which the joy of living and the joy of working are blended in one harmony. Let me read you a quotation from old Burton, the great authority on morbi eruditorum. There are many reasons why students dote more often than others. The first is their neglect. Other men look to their tools. A painter will wash his pencils. A smith will look to his hammer, anvil, forge. A husbandman will mend his plough irons and grind his hatchet if it be dull. A falconer or huntsman will have an especial care of his hawks, hounds, horses, dogs, etc. A musician will string and unstring his lute, etc. Only scholars neglect that instrument, their brain and spirits, which they daily use. Much study is not only believed to be a weariness of the flesh, but also an active cause of ill health of mind in all grades and phases. I deny that work, legitimate work, has anything to do with this. It is that foul fiend, worry, who is responsible for a large majority of the cases. The more carefully one looks into the causes of nervous breakdown in students, the less important is work per se as a factor. There are a few cases of genuine overwork, but they are not common. Of the causes of worry in the student life, there are 3 of prime importance, to which I may briefly refer. An anticipatory attitude of mind, a perpetual forecasting, disturbs the even tenor of his way and leads to disaster. Years ago a sentence in one of Carlyle's essays made a lasting impression on me. Our duty is not to see what lies dimly at a distance, but to do what lies clearly at hand. I have long maintained that the best motto for a student is, take no thought for the morrow. Let the day's work suffice. Live for it, regardless of what the future has in store, believing that tomorrow should take thought for the things of itself. There is no such safeguard against the morbid apprehensions about the future, the dread of examinations and the doubt of the ultimate success. Nor is there any risk that such an attitude may breed carelessness. On the contrary, the absorption in the duty of the hour is in itself the best guarantee of ultimate success. He that observeth the wind shall not sow, and he that regardeth the clouds shall not reap. Which means you cannot work profitably with your mind set upon the future. Another potent cause of worry is an idolatry by which many of you will be sore let and hindered. The mistress of your studies shall be the heavenly Aphrodite, the motherless daughter of Uranus. Give her your whole heart, and she will be your protectress and friend. A jealous creature, brooking no second, if she finds you trifling and coquetting with her rival, the younger earthly Aphrodite, daughter of Zeus and Dione, she will whistle you off and let you down the wind to be a prey, perhaps to the examiners, certainly to the worm regret. In plainer language, put your affections in cold storage for a few years, and you will take them out ripened, perhaps a bit mellow, but certainly less subject to those frequent changes which perplex so many young men. Only a grand passion and ill-absorbing devotion to the elder goddess can save the man with a congenital tendency to philandering, the flighty Lydgate, who sports with Celia and Dorothea, and upon whom the judgment ultimately falls in a basil plant of a wife like Rosamond. And thirdly, one and all of you will have to face the ordeal of every student in this generation who sooner or later tries to mix the waters of science with the oil of faith. You can have a great deal of both if you only keep them separate. The worry comes from the attempt at mixture. As general practitioners you will need all the faith you can carry, and while it may not always be of the conventional pattern, when expressed in your lives rather than on your lips, the variety is not a bad one from the standpoint of St. James, and may help to counteract the common scandal alluded to in the celebrated diary of that gossipy old pasteur doctor, the Rev. John Ward. One told the Bishop of Gloucester that he imagined physicians of all other men, the most competent judges of all other affairs of religion, and his reason was because they were wholly unconcerned with it. Professional work of any sort tends to narrow the mind, to limit the point of view, and to put a hallmark on a man of a most unmistakable kind. On the one hand are the intense, ardent natures, absorbed in their studies and quickly losing interest in everything but their profession, while other faculties and interests fussed, unsued. On the other hand are the bovine brethren, who think of nothing but the treadmill and the corn. From very different causes, the one from concentration, the other from apathy, both are apt to neglect those outside studies that widen the sympathies and help a man to get the best there is out of life. Like art, medicine is an exacting mistress, and in the pursuit of one of the scientific branches, sometimes too in practice, not a portion of a man's spirit may be left free for other distractions, but this does not often happen. On account of the intimate personal nature of his work, the medical man, perhaps more than any other man, needs that higher education of which Plato speaks, that education in virtue from youth upwards, which enables a man eagerly to pursue the ideal perfection. It is not for all, nor can all attain to it, but there is comfort and help in the pursuit, even though the end is never reached. For a large majority, the daily round and the common task furnish more than enough to satisfy their heart's desire, and there seems no room left for anything else. Like the good, easy man whom Milton scores in the Areopagitica, whose religion was a traffic so entangled that of all mysteries he could not skill to keep a stock going upon that trade, and handed it over with all the locks and keys to a divine of note and estimation. So it is with many of us in the matter of this higher education. No longer intrinsic, wrought in us and ingrained, it has become, in Milton phrase, a dividual movable, handed over nowadays to the daily press or to the haphazard instruction of the pulpit, the platform, or the magazines. Like a good many other things, it comes in a better and more enduring form, if not too consciously sought. The all-important thing is to get a relish for the good company of the race in a daily intercourse with some of the great minds of all ages. Now, in the springtime of your life, pick your intimates among them, and begin a systematic cultivation of their works. Many of you will need a strong leaven to raise you above the dough in which it will be your lot to labour, uncongenial surroundings, an ever-present dissonance between the aspirations within and the actualities without, the oppressive discords of human society, the bitter tragedies of life, the lacrymae rerum, besides the hidden springs of which we sit in sad despair, all these tend to foster in some natures a cynicism quite foreign to our vocation, and to which this inner education offers the best antidote. Personal contact with men of high purpose and character will help a man to make a start, to have the desire at least, but in its fullness this culture, for that word best expresses it, has to be wrought out by each one for himself. Start at once a bedside library, and spend the last half hour of the day in communion with the saints of humanity. There are great lessons to be learned from Job and from David, from Isaiah and St. Paul. Taught by Shakespeare, you may take your intellectual and moral measure with singular precision. Learn to love Epictetus and Marcus Aurelius. Should you be so fortunate as to be a Platonist, Jowett will introduce you to the great master through whom alone we can think in certain levels, and whose perpetual modernness startles and delights. Montaigne will teach you moderation in all things, and to be sealed of his tribe is a special privilege. We have in the profession only a few great literary heroes of the first rank, the friendship and counsel of two of whom you cannot too earnestly seek. Sir Thomas Browne's Religio Medici should be your pocket companion, while from the Breakfast Table series of Oliver Wendell Holmes you can glean a philosophy of life peculiarly suited to the needs of a physician. There are at least a dozen or more works which would be helpful in getting wisdom in life, which only comes to those who earnestly seek it. A conscientious pursuit of Plato's ideal perfection may teach you the three great lessons of life. You may learn to consume your own smoke. The atmosphere is darkened by the murmurings and whimperings of men and women over the non-essentials, the trifles that are inevitably incident to the hurly-burly of the day's routine. Things cannot always go your way. Learn to accept in silence the minor aggravations. Cultivate the gift of taciturnity, and consume your own smoke with an extra draught of hard work, so that those about you may not be annoyed with the dust and soot of your complaints. More than any other, the practitioner of medicine may illustrate the second great lesson, that we are here not to get all we can out of life for ourselves, but to try to make the lives of others happier. This is the essence of that oft-repeated admonition of Christ, He that findeth his life shall lose it, and he that loseth his life for my sake shall find it. On which hard saying, if the children of this generation would only lay hold, there would be less misery and discontent in the world. It is not possible for anyone to have better opportunities to live this lesson than you will enjoy. The practice of medicine is an art, not a trade, a calling, not a business, a calling in which your heart will be exercised equally with your head. Often the best part of your work will have nothing to do with potions and powders, but with the exercise of an influence of the strong upon the weak, of the righteous upon the wicked, of the wise upon the foolish. To you, as the trusted family counsellor, the father will come with his anxieties, the mother with her hidden grief, the daughter with her trials, and the son with his follies. Fully 1/3 of the work you do will be entered in other books than yours. Courage and cheerfulness will not only carry you over the rough places of life, but will enable you to bring comfort and help to the weak-hearted, and will console you in the sad hours when, like Uncle Toby, you have to whistle that you may not weep. And the third lesson you may learn is the hardest of all, that the law of the higher life is only fulfilled by love, i.e., charity. Many a physician whose daily work is a daily round of beneficence will say hard things and think hard thoughts of a colleague. No sin will so easily beset you as uncharitableness towards your brother practitioner. So strong is the personal element in the practice of medicine, and so many are the wagging tongues in every parish, that evil speaking, lying, and slandering find a shining mark in the lapses and mistakes which are inevitable in our work. There is no reason for discord and disagreement, and the only way to avoid trouble is to have two plain rules. From the day you begin practice, never under any circumstances listen to a tale told to the detriment of a brother practitioner. And when any dispute or trouble does arise, go frankly ere sunset and talk the matter over, in which way you may gain a brother and a friend. Very easy to carry out, you may think. Far from it. There is no harder battle to fight. Theoretically, there seems to be no difficulty, but when the concrete wound is rankling, and after Mrs. Jones has rubbed in the cayenne pepper by declaring that Dr. J told her in confidence of your shocking bungling, your attitude of mind is that you would rather see him in purgatory than make advances towards reconciliation. Wait until the day of your trial comes, and then remember my words. And in closing, may I say a few words to the younger practitioners in the audience, whose activities will wax not wane with the growing years of the century, which opens so auspiciously for this school, for this city, and for our country. You enter a noble heritage, made so by no efforts of your own, but by the generations of men who have unselfishly sought to do the best they could for suffering mankind. Much has been done, much remains to do. A way has been opened, and to the possibilities in the scientific development of medicine there seems to be no limit. Except in its application as general practitioners, you will not have much to do with this. Yours is a higher and more sacred duty. Think not to light a light to shine before men that they may see your good works. Contrariwise, you belong to the great army of quiet workers, physicians and priests, sisters and nurses, all over the world, the members of which strive not, neither do they cry, nor are their voices heard in the streets, but to them is given the ministry of consolation in sorrow, need, and sickness. Like the ideal wife of whom Plutarch speaks, the best doctor is often the one of whom the public hears the least. But nowadays, in the fierce light that beats upon the hearth, it is increasingly difficult to lead the secluded life in which our best work is done. To you, the silent workers of the ranks, in villages and country districts, in the slums of our large cities, in the mining camps and factory towns, in the homes of the rich and in the hovels of the poor, to you is given the harder task of illustrating with your lives the Hippocratic standards of learning, of sagacity, of humanity, and of probity, of learning that you may apply in your practice the best that is known in our art, and that with the increase in your knowledge there may be an increase in that priceless endowment of sagacity, so that to all everywhere skilled succour may come in the hour of need, of a humanity that will show in your daily life tenderness and consideration to the weak, infinite pity to the suffering, and broad charity to all, of a probity that will make you under all circumstances true to yourselves, true to your high calling, and true to your fellow man. End of Chapter 18. The Master Word in Medicine. Recording by Luke Sartor, Griffith, New South Wales,